Hi.
Hey, how are you?
Good.
Um, let's see. We're waiting on people to connect with us, and I was going to pull up. Want to be sure I can say my own name. I'm Iris Carter, and tonight, um, Margot is not with us because she has a wedding. So we have Kathy Andrews with us, and I'm going to tell y'all a little bit more about who she is in a few minutes. But just kind of waiting for people to join us, and we're streaming live on Facebook and YouTube. And this is also being recorded so that anybody who's not with us the whole time, or if you have to watch this later, it'll be available for viewing. Um, We've also, if you're new to our show, welcome. We encourage people to post questions, whether you're watching us on Facebook or YouTube. You can post your questions in the chat, and we can tell which venue you're watching from as far as whether it's Facebook or YouTube. But if you're on YouTube, you're not going to see the Facebook comments, but we'll tell you what they are and show them on screen so that people will understand that people are commenting on different sides. But we encourage you, if you're new, to please say hello, and if you're returning, please say hello as well. um and Deborah says hi, Iris and Kathy. And Kathy, I was just telling you, my sister comes and watches us, and that is her. She's
Oh,
coming from
okay.
yeah. So welcome, Deborah, and we do encourage. Please comment and let us know you're here. I've been getting some responses. We were listed on Eventbrite, and of course, there's no fee or anything. So it's like so and so bought a ticket, because that's the way they call it, and I get an email, and it's well, yeah, it's a free ticket, but like they really need a ticket. But it was a way to promote the program and let people know. And I've had some different people that I don't recognize their names um, interested. So I'm hoping if they show up that they'll make their presence known. Um, and Kathy is with us. I want to share. Let's see. Well, first of all, let me explain. Kathy Andrews is from Wings on the Ground, is in reference to her business name. And she has experiences as a psychic medium, an end of life midwife, or death doula, as some people refer to these people, um, and a reflexologist, as well as being a published author. There was quite a few other things on your list of experiences and abilities and that sort of thing. So we'll kind of dive into some of those in a few minutes. But I wanted to show, I love your logo.
Thank
Um,
you.
tell us a little bit about the logo.
Well,
Where did it come from?
an actual friend, a friend of mine actually created that for me. Um, we kind of looked at different fonts to choose, and I definitely knew the colors. I knew that I wanted to have the center of it be a compass rose, um, for guidance.
Mhm.
And but she put a lot of work into that using the Fibonacci spiral.
Right.
Um, so it's actually very mathematical the way that the whole logo is. I don't know if you know, but different large companies use the Fibonacci spiral to be able to create logos,
And
because
what
energetically they attract people.
I was wondering, did that have something to do with the geometry of
Yes.
the, yeah, there, what is the, well, I'm thinking of like man mandel, no, I'm saying mandalas, and that's not well, and they happen like the nautilus symbol, and spiral staircases and those kinds of things. Is that the same? Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So
Coca-Cola uses used the same math equations to do their logos.
Wow.
Hmm.
Yeah. Now I did not. I mean, I guess I sort of did know math was involved, but I knew there was something to those. There was synchronicity in that sort of thing. So
Hmm.
that is cool. I would not have known that. Um, all right, and then you've written a book, Heart's Higher Ground. Okay, do you want to tell us a little bit about what that's about? Have you written more than one book? Is that
No,
the
that
first
was my only attempt thus far. Um, I'm thinking about doing other ones, or at least doing ebooks, because that was published back in 2007 or 2006,
one?
and a lot's happened since then. But that book is, my guides were wanting me to share some of my experiences I had with star beings
Oh, wow.
and being on craft, and my experiences as a young adult. Um, and I was, I'll say this over and over again, but when spirit has approached me about doing something, I'm usually really resistant. um, I've gotten a little bit less resistant as I've gotten older, because they're pretty relentless. And so if I don't do something pretty quickly that's been suggested, um, they find ways of coercing me into doing it. Like that book, I didn't want to use my real name. That's my maiden name.
Mm.
And so I wanted to use a pen name because I didn't want people to know that I had relationships, like family relationships, with ETs. And so it's a very small book, but it was intentional to be small. They wanted me to publish this book and like leave it in different places, like in doctors' waiting rooms, and to go into Barnes and Noble and stick it in there,
Oh, wow.
in with their books, just to have it be a short, quick read. And I recently just ordered a whole bunch more of them because of disclosure that's coming forward now. Um, I know that there are a lot of people that have had experiences with seeing craft or seeing ETs. And some of them haven't been pleasant. Some of them have been. Mine have, for the most part, been pleasant. And there were a couple of summers, there was an actual, I live in Myrtle Beach, and at Broadway at the beach, there was a traveling exhibit about ETs. And it was such an honor to take people through the exhibit. And almost every time when I would take a tour group, when we were finished with the exhibit, at the end, somebody would pull me aside and they'd say, I saw this thing once. And the relief on their faces, because a lot of times they hadn't shared their experiences with anybody because they didn't want to be thought that of as a kook, you know.
Mm.
They didn't want to be discredited. Some of them were professional people that probably didn't want to risk their careers. But the relief that was on their faces using me as a witness to things that they had experienced themselves, it was such an honor. So that's kind of what the book is all about. At the end of each chapter, there's questions about have you ever ... Just to let people know that they're not alone, that they're not crazy, that somebody else has had experiences like that. And I still held down I worked in healthcare for a long time and also as an insurance agent. And so I held very responsible jobs. I'm not crazy.
Yeah, yeah. No, I think that's fascinating. And I know that's probably a whole nother show, and I'll have to
Yeah.
have you come back. But can you? Can How old were you when your first visitation or experience happened?
Um, my first really remembered one was as an adult. Um, but it was kind of like a hologram came into my room as an adult and said, he told me his name and said that I had known him for a long time. So as a child, but I don't have memories of that.
Ah, okay. Just a second. Valerie Thurman has joined us. I want to say hello to Valerie. Welcome. And
Hey, Valerie.
if anybody has questions as we go along, please post your questions. Feel free to interact with the conversation that we're having. Um, and so then, where you said you visited on craft, what did that? How did that happen? Was that
Um, it's happened a couple of different ways. The first time I actually was not asleep, and it was scary because I was lifted up out of my bed um, into the sky, and I don't like heights, so I was very scared. I was more scared of being up in the air than I was seeing these beings.
Mhm.
Um, and so um, when I was returned to my bed, I asked them not to do that anymore. I said, if you're gonna if you're gonna be taking me around different places, I need you to do it during dream time and come to me in my dream state and escort me that way. And so there were a lot of different experiences I've had. I've been called out, which is really interesting because there's been some television shows on Gaia. I don't know if you've seen them about the secret space programs and things like that. And I've often wondered watching them if I was ever involved in that because there were times when I was taken to places I didn't know where I was and asked to identify other craft as to being friendly or not.
wow?
Um,
So what did it
yeah.
feel like being on a craft? Was it like what you see on TV with was it more Star Trekky or was it more
Um,
Independence Day? I mean,
the biggest the biggest difference in from the ones that I've been on um, compared to maybe what you would think it would look like. And this has also been confirmed later on some of the shows I've seen on Gaia where they've had some of the people on the secret space program. So when my husband and I are watching the show and he's heard all my stories, so when they confirm what I've told him, he just looks at me like, whoa. But the biggest thing is that the craft themselves are a consciousness. And so for the pilot or commander to be able to control the craft, they use their minds to, like, perhaps there's a co-pilot, I don't know what you'd call him, but the navigator, the one that actually knows the coordinates of where they're going. And so they only need to think about where they need to go and the ship will go. So that was a lot of fun when I was working at the museum because this is just a knowing that I have, and from observing when I have been on these craft. Um, and I would take kids into, they had a model of a mothership there at the museum, and I would take kids into there and I'd say, now, this is the control panel, and here's the windshield that you can see where you're going. What do you notice is missing? There's no steering wheel. So I would ask the kids, well, how do you think they move the ship? And do you know that almost all of them got it? Not even hardly thinking about it. Oh, they use their minds.
Yes. Yes.
So
Hey,
you know, and I used to laugh at that because I would think, you know, I'll bet you all these tourists, because, you know, Myrtle Beach is a big tourist city.
uh-huh.
I'll bet you most of these people think I've been given a script to read
Little
all
did
this
they
stuff,
know.
you
Yeah.
know, and it wasn't. It was just from my own experiences. Um,
That is fascinating. That is fascinating. So what did the beings that took you, what did they look like?
Most of the ones that I worked with were very tall and golden or tan with really long limbs. They were tall. I would say probably 8 or 9 feet tall. Um, I also was around some of the beings we know as mantis,
Yes. They're
and
the
they I mean, I'm sure that as far as ETs go, it's just like humans. There are good guys and bad guys everywhere.
Mhm.
Um, except for Venus, I think that most of them are all about love. They vibrate to love. But the mantis beings are very sweet and very smart. As scary as they look, because they were very tall, also, I was never afraid of them.
'Cause they look more insect-like or something,
Yes,
don't they? Yeah.
like a praying
Like
mantis.
praying mantis, yeah.
Yeah.
But
And sometimes they would take me to what looked like a university or like a United Nations. Kim, hi Kim.
I
Hey Randy. Um, so and different people, different beings would wear different uniforms. Um, there was another time I was in a large room with all sorts of beings, like at a United Nations, and I was an interpreter.
wow. So you were understanding their language to or wow. Very cool.
But you know, the biggest thing was that I was never afraid of them. One of the earliest times that I was taken on board a craft, I was actually given a test for purity of heart. Um, they showed me a picture of Earth, and it was turning brown from pollution. And they said, they asked me to tone to the planet to save Earth. And I had an awareness from a long time ago that using sound can create, but sound can also destroy. And so I refused to do it because I didn't want to be responsible for um, blowing up the earth. um, and so I remember just feeling such heartache as I was kind of apologizing to humankind that I wasn't able to save them. And that's when the being said it, this is just a hologram of what could happen in the future. We just wanted to make sure that you had a pure heart, and that to abide by harm none.
Mhm.
And even though I couldn't remember exactly what the sound would be to destroy something, I couldn't remember what exactly the tones were that would be helpful or destructive. And so I elected not to do anything. And that was the right choice for them, because they knew that they could trust me, that I wasn't going to just say, oh, well, I'll just do this and hope it's right.
Yeah, yeah. That takes a lot more courage than
Hmm.
it
Oh, it was
really.
heartbreaking.
Yeah.
Um, and I think that, I initially had more contact with the ETs prior to having contact with angelic beings, and that seemed kind of a natural flow for me, um, to go from that, which I can tell a difference, to go from that to the angelic realm.
Yeah.
They're
Yeah.
different.
Well, and there, yeah, because there, I would think that, from my understanding, ETs, they've progressed a lot further than humans have in some ways.
Right.
but but it doesn't mean that they're deities by any means. I mean,
Right.
yeah, and so I think people sometimes think that that's what that's what people who are into this think. And it's like, no, they're just another population that just
Right.
happens to live somewhere else and are here, whatever. Um, uh, Randy commented on your doll in the background. Do you want to
Oh,
tell us about her? Yeah, we were.
my fairy. That's Deidre.
Ah, she's so pretty. um, share. Okay, so let me. You were in Crete, and I know we've got some pictures I was going to show.
Mm,
And talk, because that I can't remember what your title is from that, but I know you were designated as.
that was an initiation into the Rose line of Grail Queens, following the lineages of Isis and Divine Mother Mary and Mary Magdalene. That was
Yeah.
in 2017.
Wow. So what did it take to have that happen? I mean, what?
We were there for, I think, 10 days. And so we took different temple teachings of what they used to teach women, um, back in the days of the Isis temples. There was a lot of sound healing in that time, but we also, one of the really interesting things that happened to me personally was getting in touch with the bee priestesses of ancient Greece that were called Melissa. And there's a whole study of bee priestesses and how the bees were supposed to have come here from Venus.
Oh, wow. Like
Hmm.
buzzing bees. Bzzz.
Pardon
Is that
me?
talking about bees like buzzing bees?
Yeah,
Bzzz.
honeybees.
Honeybees. Okay. That's right, because the honey, bee whispers and that sort of thing. Yeah, gotcha. I hope
Hmm.
everybody else is following along. If you're not, say something. But yeah,
I have
sometimes
a
I'm a little
tendency to
slow
go
on
off
the
in all different directions too. So.
I know just enough to be dangerous.
Yeah.
um, so have you ever done the Tawanda thing, going out and getting bees from? Have you ever done anything with bees?
Mm-mm.
Just checking. Okay, so tell us. You also, we were talking about these women's groups that you.
The wings on the ground.
Yes, tell us about that, and I'll show some of these pictures.
Um, Back in 2013, I do energy healing also, and it's called Laho Chi. So
Mhm.
it's similar to Reiki but different.
Okay,
Um,
and you.
and so at the end of every angel light, which was part of Laho Chi, um, I started having angelic beings communicating with me at the end of
Wow.
each of the classes. And it was done in a light language, which I had never experienced before. So it was very strange for me. I suppose it's like speaking in tongues, but that I had not had any experience with that at all. Um, and it kept getting stronger and stronger to the point of this needs to be its own entity. And so various angels, archangels, Metatron is the main angel that I work with, and Gabriel and Michael, also the being Gaia, Mother Earth. They all channeled. What they brought forth was called virtues. They called them virtues, 9 virtues that help humans be the angelic wings on the ground. I mean, they gave me the name of what to call it. And so there are 9 different virtues, such as courage, clarity of purpose, forgiveness, detached compassion, awareness, environmental awareness. And so the way that they explained it to me initially was that imagine if you're sitting in a circle, La Ho Chi, it's LA, and then the next word is HO, and the last word is Chi, like the energy Chi, CHI.
I'll put it in the chat.
Okay. Where was I? Oh, the virtues. So imagine you're sitting in a circle with, and everybody has a clear glass of water in front of them. All the virtues that the angels discuss are virtues that all of us have inside us already, but they need to be amplified for the times that were coming when I started doing this, that we're in now.
Yeah.
And so after people would receive their attunement, which is done in light language, sung in light language to them, then you'd look around the table and everybody's water is the same level in the glass. So for instance, if somebody needed a little bit more amplification of courage, the person sitting next to them might have a full cup. It's not a competition, but everybody gets what they need. So that it's a way of being. It's not a modality, although they are bringing forth a modality for healing that involves using the eyes for healing. I think I'm probably going to be presenting that next fall. It's pretty close to being formulated. We also have it's a very interactive class that we do it as a retreat. When I started teaching that, we were teaching 3-hour classes 3 months in a row on Sundays, and it was difficult for people to come to all 3 months in a row, even though it was just on one day for 3 hours. Then we started doing it in my house. The energy got too big to be in my house. If you can understand what I'm saying, the energy in the room, I would just be sweating bullets. It was so hot when the energy would come in. So one of my friends mentioned, well, we're here at the beach. Why don't you rent a beach house? And then that way, people won't have to come and go in and out of the energy field. They can just come and stay the whole weekend and experience it all together in a container. So that's what we started doing. And we've been doing that for the last 3 years, I believe. I believe we've been doing it 3 years now. The one that we did last March, myself and my team, we did rent a house near the beach. We weren't right on the beach this time, but we did a virtual retreat because travel was still kind of iffy um, for people to make the trip here. So I'm hoping by next fall, maybe October, November, I'm hoping that maybe things will be calmed down enough that we can do it in person again, because I really, even though I think that the energy was still very palpable and was still felt um, through the lens of the laptop or whatever the camera people were using. I don't even remember. That's part of my team. Um, Even though it was palpable, I think it still has a completely different feel to it when you're all together in the room for a whole weekend. It involves a Friday night, all day Saturday, and all day Sunday.
Yeah, yeah.
So,
I've been in workshops like that where it is much different when you're there in person and the energy, and you kind of create a sacred space.
yes,
And so it's nice to hold that when you can.
right. And it's difficult. I tried to do something special for local people that would not be able to come to stay a whole weekend. Maybe they had small children
Mhm.
or, whatever the situation was. And so we called them day angels, and they just came, they experienced everything, but they went home every night. That was even difficult for them to do, to go home to their families and kind of get out of the energy of the angelic and the elementals who were present, because it's everything. Wings on the Ground has all realms of existence involved. We've got the elementals, we've got the angelics, we've got the galactics. Um, Anything you can think of. And so it's really, really hard to move in and out of that energy.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Um, so tell okay, and then I wanted to show this because you explained this is your you
I
explained.
make um, I make elixirs.
Mhm.
Those are flower essences, and they also contain essences of trees and fruits and vegetables and crystals. Now,
Oh.
that was one of the very first things I did when I started to awaken. My guides actually asked me to make planetary essences using the chemicals of all the planets in our star system. And so you can see why I'm resistant to a lot of their suggestions. I was like,
Hey, let me go
what
look
are
in my
you
spice
talking
cabinet
about?
and see if I can find talk about putting in a long distance order. I mean,
Right. I was like, no, that sounds like that's going to take way too much research. So I started looking at flower essences, and I started making them myself. And I have taught classes so other people can make their own flower essences. They're not like essential oils. It's just the vibratory signature of every flower or plant, a twig, a tree, a leaf, whatever I'm using. And you put it in water. It has to be in a clear glass bowl with no imprint on it, because I don't know if you're aware of Dr. Emoto's work with
mm,
water. Like,
no.
you can write words on a water bottle, and the ice crystals that form in the water bottle, if the bottle says love, it would come across as a beautiful crystal, whereas something like hate would come across as a very ugly, very unorganized ice
Oh
crystal.
yeah, now I've seen
His
that.
name is Dr. Emoto. He's no longer on this plane with us, but it's EMOTO if anybody wants to look at his work. Um, but that's the reason why you would put it in a glass bowl. It's kind of like steeping it out in the sun for 4 hours. And then you remove the plant material, and I create a mother bottle. And so each mother bottle just has one single essence in it, whether it's a flower or a vegetable or whatever it is. When you combine the flower essences to make the blends that I make, then they become what's called elixirs. And I usually make mine with brandy as the preservative, but I can also make them if people don't want to have brandy at all. I can also make them with apple cider vinegar or vegetable glycerin. And so the set that you have a picture of right there is one of the newest ones that I made. And those are affirmation essences. That's called the I Am collection.
Mm-hmm.
So we've got all sorts of I am abundant, I am light, I am love, I am sovereign. That's a real big one right now.
Oh, yes.
I am vibrant, I am healthy, I am peaceful, I am safe, I am worthy. So they really, you take 4 drops, no matter how you're using it. The easiest way is to just use 4 drops under your tongue. And you can use them as often as you want. There's not a side effect to it because it doesn't actually have the plant material in it. It just has the vibratory signature, the frequency of whatever I have steeped in the water.
Okay. So
And so they're for different things. Each flower, everything has its own energy and its own field and its own medicine.
interesting. So you steep the plant in water, you put it through that process, and then you add brandy or whatever to preserve.
Right. The mother bottles, I usually use like a 32-ounce brown bottle, a brown beer bottle, sterilize it, put about a third of the preservative in the bottle first. And of course, I use cheesecloth usually to filter it. Because sometimes, when I have the bowl or a glass sitting out in the sun for 4 hours, sometimes bugs get into the water. And I don't want bugs in my bottles.
No.
So I'll use cheesecloth to filter it and fill up the bottle the rest of the way. So that becomes the mother bottle.
And then you can mix from
And
there.
then I can mix them. Yeah.
Gotcha.
When I first started doing those back, I think it was maybe 2001 or 2002 when I first started making them. And my kids were younger then. They're both young adults now, but they would come into the house and I'd be in the kitchen with all these bottles and plants and leaves and stuff. And their friends would say, "What's your mom doing?" "Oh, she's making her potions."
Yeah. Well, and that's how you get, the reputations.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
She's making potions,
yeah.
but it's fun stuff. That's interesting. Um, I've not really, I'm not familiar with that, so that's pretty cool.
You may have seen, like in health food stores, Bach flower remedies.
Yes, yeah,
Okay, that's what they are.
gotcha. Okay, all right, and because the bot flower, how is that spelled? Do you remember?
BACH.
Okay, it is BACHFLOWER. So if you haven't seen that, I want to share that with people. And
Right.
also, I wanted to mention because we've talked about Gaia a couple of times, and Gaia is reference to Earth energy, the Earth life force, so to speak. But it's also is it Gaia.org or Gaia.com? I don't remember.
I'm not sure.
Yeah, and it's spelled GAIA.
Yes.
And um they have like a paid membership, but there's also free stuff there. Lots of videos on lots of topics,
Yes.
metaphysical, spiritual, you name it. I mean, it really is a treasure trove of
It is.
information. So I wanted to make sure we address those. So that said, let's go into what I thought was going to be our main topic of discussion, and we hadn't even gotten to it yet. But want to spend a little bit of time with it. You refer to yourself as a
Death
end of
doula.
life midwife, as and so explain that, because we've heard different, and some people might not have even heard of like a death doula or a and I think most people now know what a it's Gaia.com. Thank you, Deborah. uh um she the doula, we know about birth doulas that help with birth and that sort of thing, um, and all the preparation and all that. So there are now becoming more recognizable as death doulas. But I like your term of the midwife, end of life midwife. So explain why you chose that term and kind of what you do.
When and again, this was something that just kind of fell into my lap, so to speak. Um, my very first instance of it was probably in 1990, I believe it was. Um, a family member had been involved in a fire and was in the hospital. And I was awakened in the middle of the night around 3 o'clock in the morning. I still remember what time it was. And I sat straight upright in bed, and it was like I could feel a cold wind pass through me. And I knew to look at the clock because I hadn't ever felt that before. And it was around 3 a.m. And we found out the next day that he had passed at 3 a.m. And that was, you know, my son was a baby. I had a lot of stuff going on. So I just kind of looked at it like, oh, that's interesting. And then years later, my Laho Chi teacher was ill. And I had read a book called Deathing, which I refer to quite a bit when I'm teaching the Creating Sacred Space classes. And so there were a couple of prayers in there. And I knew, I won't say her name, but I knew that she was pretty close to crossing over. And I had gotten that book probably 10 years prior to actually using it. And I never, it's a thick book.
And what's the
And
name of it again?
Deathing,
Deathing.
Deathing.
Okay.
And it's written in two parts. One is the from the point of view as somebody who is going through the death experience that has been trained to have a conscious death experience, and somebody who has not. And the biggest difference is lack of fear with a person that has been trained. And so anyway, I had been told to get this book in a reading 10 years before I used it. And the person that was doing my reading said that that was going to be part of my life's work.
Wow.
So you and I had talked about how things, sometimes take a long time to manifest.
Yeah.
So,
Well, it's like you tell your gods and your angels, wow, that's really great. But how?
yeah, and that's a hard thing to let go of, is the planning of how it should look or when it should happen and all, et cetera, et cetera. It's hard to surrender into the allowance of things to come into your life. So anyway, a weekend before she actually passed, I sat on my couch in my house, and I was in Greensboro then. and she was living in near Asheville. And so I said those prayers over and over and over again. And that Sunday night, one of our mutual friends said that she was going to take, it was Hendersonville. She was taking a trip up there to see the woman because she was pretty close to death. And she asked me if I wanted to go. And I said, no, I've been working with her all weekend. I think we're good. And I don't know if you've heard about this before, but a lot of times when people have already died, they use electronics to communicate with their loved ones still on this side of the veil. So after I hung up the phone, I went in the bathroom and the lights kept flicking on and off in the bathroom. So I called my friend back and I said, I think she wants me to be there.
Oh.
So I went and we anointed her body. Now, when I was sitting on the couch working with her, I clearly heard in my head her voice saying that she was going to go out with the rain, and I needed to tell people that. So I did tell her husband, and I told a couple other people that that's what she said. The day after we had gone up to visit her, it hadn't rained in Hendersonville in like 2 weeks. And right as she took her last breath, there was a clap of thunder and it started pouring rain.
Oh, my.
And the reason why I think she really wanted me to come was to validate this gift that I've been given, that it's real, it's a real thing, to help people cross over.
Yes, that makes sense.
I've got so many stories about that. There is not, there's no kind of governing body that will certify you to be an end of life midwife, or I like the term midwife better, because that's what you're doing. You're midwifing the soul of the person to cross over in a manner that's sacred and dignified, and it involves using music and using essential oils and knowing what kind of music to play and what part of the process, using oils for the support of the dying person as well as the family members. And so it's my most sacred work. It
Yeah.
really is. There have just been so many stories about people that have contacted me when their loved ones are getting ready to pass, and it's a big help. Of course, they have to be pretty open-minded to hear what I have to say, to even think of the possibility that somebody that's sitting right next to them would be able to communicate with somebody who is in a coma, or somebody that has been unconscious for a few hours or whatnot, and to be able to report back to the family. But that's what I do. That's
Yeah.
what I do. I cannot teach somebody else to, at least I haven't figured out a way to do it yet, to do that kind of work the same way I do it. I believe that the other classes that you can take, that would teach you how to be a death doula or how to be an end of life guide or whatever name is used, they mostly focus on creating a sacred space for the person that's in transition, and helping the family understand the different stages and what their loved one is going through. And I do that to some extent. I report back to the family what's going on, especially when the person's unconscious.
Yeah.
And it's been such a big help to the families. And a lot of times, the only person I've ever assisted that I've ever been bedside with was my own dad. Everybody else I have talked to, there have been several people that have passed while their loved ones were on the phone with me asking me what to do. And so that might not seem like that's real sacred, but space is of no consequence with what I do
Because
in
you're dealing
my
with
work to
the
help them.
person on the other side. Do you ever deal with people who have a prognosis of death? They're not ready to die yet, but they're wanting to know what's coming and how to prepare. Do you ever get those kind of calls?
Yes, I often don't really start talking to the person until they're actively dying. Now I can sit with the person and doing it the same way I do mediumship readings. It's the same energetic space to go with somebody who's about to cross over as when I'm doing a reading for somebody who has already crossed over. And finding out, especially if they're unconscious, let's say, because I can still communicate with them. And to see, well, what is it that you're afraid of? I We discussed a little bit before the show about a man that was afraid that when his time came, that he wasn't going to know how to leave his body. So I took him on a look-see that was helping him leave his body to go off to where he was going. And but usually people don't call me to help out until they're actively dying.
Gotcha.
And yeah, I guess that's the best way to explain it.
Well, tell a little bit about the I think the story you were telling me a little bit about was there was the man who was taking a long time to die, and you went in and found out it was because he didn't have any he didn't think there was anything in the afterlife for him.
Right. He did not believe in any kind of afterlife, and so he was really clinging. His death took a long time. Um, so when I go into spirit, I still maintain a human form. I still look like me. And the people that I help cross over still look like them, but not as solid. Um, and so, him not having any belief in the afterlife, it was challenging for me because I could see what he could see. So, he was standing on a cliff with a very deep ravine, almost like the Grand Canyon deep. And his family, his loved ones, including a really loved aunt of his, was on the other side on a cliff facing him, and they kept beckoning him to come over. He was afraid if he stepped off the cliff that everything would go black and there would be nothing. He would cease to exist. And so I had to gain his trust to listen to me, to take that first step. And I told him that the ground would meet him with every step that he took, so that he wasn't going to fall into oblivion, that he would get to the other side. And so we walked step by step, till he got to the other side. And then when he was able to embrace his aunt, I think she had partially raised him, he was able to let go and finally passed. But that was the most challenging one because he didn't have any kind of a concept of an afterlife at all. All this work is very non-denominational. And I always take into account if there is a a deity involved, um, for them to focus on. But I personally have never seen Jesus or Buddha during those times of crossing over, but I have seen family members and um, relatives, friends come to greet the person.
Well, and somehow I don't see Jesus and Buddha being on the welcoming committee for every person that dies either. It's kind of like maybe you'll run into them later. We'll take the tour later.
Yeah, and that may be also, I know that I can only go a only so far with the soul of the person that's crossing over, so that I can still get back.
Yeah, right.
Because, until it's my time to go.
Deborah asks, do you ever have people getting ready to pass who don't want you intervening? Iris was sent out of our mom's room for her pass. Yes, and I told you that story, and I've mentioned it on here before.
Right.
I
I haven't had anybody say that they didn't want me intervening, but they have said, I worked with a girl who was young, and she was at work on a Wednesday and she was gone on Friday. She went that fast. I don't remember what exactly she had wrong with her, but her body went into sepsis. And so I was at work on Thursday afternoon. And so I was in my office. I closed the door so nobody could see me. And I just sat there and went to her in spirit. And she was like, "What are you doing here?" I said, "This is what I do." And she said, "Well, I don't need your help. I know what to do." I said, "Oh, okay." And she passed the next morning at 5 o'clock in the morning. Now, hers is an interesting story because when we went to her funeral, the whole office went to her funeral. And she was very involved with her youth group in her church. And her youth group had just had a party in the sanctuary on Sunday, and this was a Monday funeral. Well, there were balloons up on the ceiling of the church, and a yellow balloon sunk down from the ceiling, went right in front of the pew that I was sitting in, and all of her department. I sat with the girls from her department. And that balloon went in front of every one of us, like at face level. And when it finished going down that row, it rose back up to the top of the sanctuary. So we all looked at each other and said, "That was Cindy."
Yeah. Letting you know. And that's interesting. It's like a yellow balloon, because with yellow ribbons and stuff like that. That's interesting. Wow. You mentioned also that there are other ways to help people, like in passing, and things to do and not to do. You were talking about like saying a person's name. What happens?
Right. It actually keeps them anchored into their body. And so one of the helpful things to say about, to go to the light, but you don't try not to actually say their name. Like
that kind of calls them back, right?
Because it calls them back. And the same thing, you would think that it would be great to be in a bed and be able to look out at a beautiful garden. But sometimes that can keep the soul anchored in the body too, because they're leaving this beautiful place, this beautiful garden. It might be at their house that they've toiled in the garden for years and had created a place of beauty. And that also keeps them anchored in their body. So the best thing to do is to have a silent vigil in a darkened room. If it's during the day, to close the blinds. Okay. And I go over all of that in the Creating Sacred Space for the Dying class that I teach. I am getting ready to teach one November 6th here in Myrtle Beach. I don't have all the details yet. It's going to be at the Marriott Courtyard, Marriott that's at Broadway at the beach. A lot of people that come here on vacation, at least on the East Coast, um, would know where Broadway at the beach is. And we're going to have a day of empowerment. So they're going to be different teachers and teaching different things. And I know that my class, I think, is 12:30 to 3 that day. So if people want to get in touch with me, I'm on Facebook.
Yeah, let me
Wings on the Ground on Facebook is the easiest way to get me. I have a website, but I'm actually more active on Facebook than I am on the website. And whenever I'm doing classes, I put up events. So that might be a fun thing for people to come into town and experience a whole day of hearing from teachers. I know another lady is teaching a class on how to communicate with your guides and angels, and another one's doing a past life workshop. So there's going to be several of us teaching in one day, and that's November 6th.
Interesting. Okay. So, and Deborah says, what's the typical time investment you need to do your job as a death doula?
That varies too. Um, Usually when somebody contacts me, it's pretty close to the time of when the person is passing. There have been a couple instances, and Spirit just always works things out for me. I'm no longer working full time, but when I was working, it seemed like people would pass either on a weekend or in the evenings when I wasn't at work. So that it just always seemed to make the way that I would be available when the person was passing. I know I helped one of my friends with one of her parents, and I was out to dinner with some friends, and she called me and said that her parent was actively dying. And I said, okay. I remember saying, don't worry about hearing any moaning. That's her body shutting down. And as soon as I said that, she hadn't been moaning at all. And as soon as I said that, her mom started moaning. So it was like, and that same person lost her husband as well. And I worked with them for several days.
You mentioned about the woman that said she was going to go out with the rain, and you
Yes.
also said that storms, snow and rainstorms,
Because we are electrical beings. We have electrical charges keeping that flow through our body that are keeping us alive. So sometimes if somebody is having a little bit of a difficulty leaving their body, letting go, relaxing into that, to let go, their soul knows it can kind of hitchhike on the energy of the weather. And so a lot of times you will have people that maybe seemingly were hanging on for a while unexpectedly, and maybe it will storm. Maybe we'll have a thunderstorm, and they'll leave. They'll pass away during the thunderstorm, and during a snowstorm. There's a lot of static electricity in the air when it's snowing outside. So when I learned that, that was really interesting. I have had some people, the person that was afraid, the person that was agnostic, that didn't have a belief in an afterlife at all. I remember his wife actually turned the water on in the room that he was in. Because even the running water, that's what our hydroelectric plants are, right? So she turned the water on in his room so that he could hear the running water and be able to use the the energy of the running water to leave. Now that didn't work for him. He was very stubborn until the very end because he didn't want to go into oblivion.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, and
And
that's
the
what he
music
thought would
too.
happen.
Music was another thing. And you said people are actually trained to play music.
Yes, there's and I believe that this is still the case, but there was something called the Chalice of Repose, and they would train people to play harps at bedside. And I think they're still in existence. Um, and you didn't have to have any kind of a musical background either. And I know that now there are some singing groups in different cities that will go and sing hymns sometimes for people. Um, and back in what I would call Renaissance days, they actually had specific music using mandolins or harps, um, because they may not have known why, but it's the vibratory nature of using stringed instruments that cause the vibration. So I just made my laptop
That's
bounce.
okay.
That would that would make the frequencies of the air vibrate, and it was easier for the soul to leave the body and go out on the frequencies of the sound waves of the stringed instruments.
That is just fascinating.
When people, if people say they're already in the hospital and they have, like you asked about before, about having a terminal diagnosis and what do you do with them, and a lot of times you can play music of their favorite music. Then, as it progresses on, you want to change that music and have no vocals and just let them relax into the music and the sound of the music, because the brain would be trained to, if they're vocals, the brain would be entrained to listen to the words.
Yeah.
And so you want them to get into a total state of relaxation to be able to cross over as gently and peacefully as possible. So the music gets quieter and quieter. And then the last piece of music that you would play would either be violins or harp, guitar. Some people, because they consider the piano a stringed instrument, because the keys are hitting wires, but I think that's a little bit
That's a little bit of a
too
stretch.
harsh. Yeah. And so I prefer to use the gentleness of a violin or a harp for them to listen to. But then when they're getting ready to take their last breaths, and if you're not sure if that's what's going on, if you have a hospice, the hospice nurses are wonderful, and they will let you know, if your loved one is in a hospice facility. They'll let you know pretty when it's pretty close. Um, that's when you want to turn the music off and just be there to witness in silence.
Um, Kim has a question. Have you ever used light language while they are passing?
I have used the light language when they're passing, um, when I'm working with them privately.
And explain one more time, what is the light language?
Light language is language that the angelics would use. Some of the galactics would use. The galactics, though, are more telepathic. But a lot of the angelics would use a light language, um, because it bypasses our human constructs, which is the same reason why when we're doing the Wings on the Ground retreats, that's done in light language, because it bypasses your brain, your brain might resist what it's hearing from spirit because you think, oh, I'm not ready to do that, or I'm not worthy of doing that, or I don't know how to do that, or I'm too old, or I'm too young, blah, 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 whatever the excuses are. And so light language communicates directly to the higher self.
Mm.
And so that is a really good way of connecting with somebody's spirit as they're crossing over, because for the same reason you don't use their name, because their higher self is guiding them. Their soul is guiding them out of their body. They don't need to actually hear words. Words are another connection to their physical vessel and to staying on the earth.
Because I have done, I mean, like I have gone up and communicated with higher, like with animals and stuff. I'll often communicate with their higher beings, because I know just looking at Fido, he's going to go, "What are you doing?" You know, and it helps. You know, you're approaching them and letting them know this is. You know, I want to see what's going on with this animal, and is it all right? And would you help make sure that they understand and interpret and that sort of thing? But, and I'm communicating telepathically, obviously, but, and sometimes it's in pictures and sometimes it's, you know, because I'm sometimes thinking words, but it's going much faster than that.
Right.
So is that light language? Because I'm not sure. A lot of times I do stuff and I don't know what it's called. I just do it because I've never had
Right.
anyone tell me. And I'm just curious, you know, how you would describe.
Well, sometimes the light language just sounds like a tone. Sometimes it sounds like an animal.
Okay.
um, whatever is necessary to be used in that circumstance, spirit will guide and let you know what form of communication is best. So also sending messages with pictures would be a form of light language, as long as there is not a spoken light language or a spoken word. That would be considered a form of light language. Images, sounds, toning, all of that.
Okay. And that would, and so you could speak to someone who is dying in a light language, like if you were called to use a tone or something, and that would be like an average person could walk in the door and hear you doing this, if you know, and then they go, "What is she doing?" Right?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So I just want to. All right. So
Yeah, they probably would.
that sounds interesting. What happened to the harp?
Right.
Okay.
And
Well,
of
that
course,
helps.
we would be speaking it very softly.
Yeah.
Um, so, and light language sounds different for different people that use light language, because just like everything else, different channelers, everything goes through our own personal filters. And so what I hear and then what I speak, it might be the same intention as somebody standing next to me, but they're going to be hearing it a little bit differently, and so that it'll come out of their mouth sounding differently. Now sometimes people write in light language symbols.
Oh.
um, Everybody can use light language, whatever feels more natural to you. It's kind of like automatic writing in a way. um, I prefer to speak it than to write it. But a lot of people are the exact opposite and they would prefer to write it. A really good person to check, to learn about light language is Jamie Price, and her name's spelled Jamye Price, Price. In fact, she has a book called Opening to Light Language. And I have that as a prerequisite to take the Wings on the Ground retreat, is for everybody to read that first.
Oh.
I didn't always do that, but I found that so many people didn't know what light language was. And so they were kind of apprehensive at the retreats. What is she going to sound like? What is she going to do? How
Well,
weird is this going to be?
and that would be my next question, is because like if somebody's drawing symbols in light language, would that be that somebody else would write the same symbols if they were to write light language? I
It
mean,
could be
is it like
possible.
a hieroglyphics type? Oh,
Yes.
if you know what this means, then you can read it. I mean, or do you have to get your little speedy decoder ring from the box of cereal in order to understand? you know,
Um,
is
you
it that
know,
consistent?
I've been asked that before about interpreting them. And for me, I'm not supposed to know what's being said, because that's another purpose of when I'm doing the attunements in light language for people. It's also bypassing my mental constructs and my ego filters. Um, like if you were at one of the classes and Spirit said, "Well, you're going to have to sell your house and move to Tibet,"
Yeah.
um, I might have, because I know you, I might have a reservation just channeling that in English. And so I'm not supposed to know what is being said, because I might have a hesitancy to protect the person if I know them, because of my own filters, because of my own human filters. And so the light language completely speaks to the higher self. It goes from my higher self to their higher self. And so it does not involve our thinking brains where we could raise objections.
Yeah, yeah. And it's in there. I have been in situations where it's like, you don't need to understand this. Just say that you'll accept it, and you're
Mm-hmm.
ready for it. And it's like, okay, and I feel and I know something's changed, and I might not get it as far as at that moment understand, but then later something will happen. And I'll go, oh, that's what that was for. So yeah, okay, interesting. And we have gone way over time. I did not mean to go this late, but you obviously we have got to get you back. And so I will be calling you again and seeing if you can join us for another time in the future. I hope you'll
Sure.
come back, because fascinating stuff. I mean, just an endless amount of knowledge and wisdom, and appreciate you bringing that to us this evening.
Thank you for having me, Iris. I've had a good time.
Well, it's been awesome. And good night to everybody. I hope you'll join us again next week. Margot will be back, and we haven't decided what we're going to talk about yet, but we've got some things on the back burner that we've been talking about bringing to y'all. So tune in, and we'll also be posting that later in the weekend about what our topic will be next week. But 9:30 Wednesday nights, and if you miss part of the show or all of the show, you can catch the recording later. And again, thank you, and namaste, everyone.
Namaste.
Thank you for joining The Eyes of Indigo with Iris Carter and Margot Ross Sears. Music is Arcadia by Kevin MacLeod of Incomptech.com, licensed under Creative Commons. Visit our Facebook page for broadcast details, www.facebook.com/Eyes of Indigo. Show is copyrighted 2021 by Iris Carter and Margot Ross Sears, all rights reserved.